calm afternoon when all I knew about my life collapsed was terrible. For 10 years, Ryan, my name is, thought I was living in a steady, content marriage with Sophia. Though we had no children, our lives was full of shared dreams, trips, and late evenings spent debating nothing and everything. At least, that's what I reasoned. That day, I decided to leave early from work. Though I generally wouldn't do it, I wanted to surprise Sophia with her preferred flowers and take her to a coffee shop. She had been far off lately, saying she needed time to clear her thoughts and was overwhelmed with work. I wrote it down as tension. Her work as an interior designer may be challenging. I spotted her across the big window as I parked next to the cafe. Sophia faced a man I didn't know while seated at a corner table. She was laughing in a way I hadn't seen in years. They were leaning in close, speaking softly. Her hand rested on his, and there was a familiarity between them that twisted my stomach. I assured myself, for a time, it was benign. Though deep inside something felt strange, perhaps he was a client or an old buddy. My heart thumping like a drum, I picked the flowers and headed within. Neither of them saw me as I went toward the table. Frozen, I stood there till Sophia looked up at last. Her smile disappeared, the soon our gazes locked. Tall, well-dressed, confident man turned to gaze at me. His expression was incomprehensible. Ryan stammered, dragging her hand away from his as though the distance separating them could wipe what I had just seen. "For what reason are you here?" I ignored it. Rather, I dug into my pocket and handed her a tiny piece of paper I had written on just minutes earlier in the car. "Don't come home," the note said. Her cheeks white, she fixed her gaze on it as though the words themselves were a slap. The man looked at the note, then at me, and slumped back in his chair with an infuriatingly placid posture, like this was simply another day for him. "Ryan, let me clarify." Sophia started, but I didn't allow her the chance. Turning, I left the flowers on the table and headed outdoors. She called my name, and I continued, not stopping. I sat in the driver's seat as I arrived to my automobile. My hand so firmly grasping the steering wheel turned my knuckles white. Rather than wanting to shout, cry, hit anything, I just sat there shocked. The woman I had trusted with my life was seated at a cafe with another man, gripping his hand as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Still to come, though, was the worst. Sophia did come home that evening despite my note. What she did next made me doubt everything about the life we had created together. That evening, Sophia strolled in the front door as if nothing had occurred. She neither carried the note nor seemed offended or contrite. She instead seemed calm, as though she had practiced whatever she was going to say for hours. Sitting on the living room couch, I looked blankly at the TV that wasn't even on. My head was running back every detail of what I had witnessed at the cafe. Her laughter, the way she held his hand. It was as though I had been fixated on a stranger who happened to resemble my wife. She said, throwing her purse on the chair close to the door. "We have to talk." I remained motionless. I hardly looked at her either. She sighed, you thought, approaching and settling down on the couch's edge. Her arrogance in being so composed infuriated me. She said, "Not what you believe." Her voice seemed too subdued, as though she were trying to calm a toddler. "Truly?" At last facing her, I said, "My wife seemed to be on a date with another man this afternoon, holding his hand and laughing like she hasn't laughed with me in years. So, if it isn't that, just let me know, Sophia." She flinched just at my tone, but she didn't stutter. "He only serves as a friend." We were chatting about employment. That sums it all. I laughed bitterly, got up, and walked around the room pacing. "Buddy, with friends, Sophia, you do not clasp hands. You don't stare at them as though they hung the moon. You don't behave as though you're in love with them right in the midst of a cafe where your husband could come in at any minute." Her cool front broke for a single second, and I saw it. The shame, the anxiety. She covered it, though, with fury just as fast. "You are exaggerating, Ryan, too much. You are blowing this out of scale. Not anything occurred. Tell me straightforwardly instead of lies." I yelled, my voice ringing across the space. I visited Sophia. Everything I saw, not stand there and denigrate my intelligence. She crossed her arms, her teeth closing. Okay, you are seeking the truth? I have been seeing him indeed, but not what you believe. It's not serious. It's really complex. Complicating? I kept on, with sarcasm flowing from my voice. What's complicated about betraying your husband? She snapped. I did not cheat, not quite physically either. Yes, we have been discussing, yet it is just emotional. Ryan, I have long been dissatisfied, and he pays me attention as well. He sees me in the same way you no longer do. Her comments landed like a goods train. I so am responsible for this. My voice just above a whisper, I asked. You are implying that I failed you somehow, why this happened? She didn't respond, but the stillness served as all the evidence I required. I shook my head, a million shards breaking in my heart. You could have chatted to Sophia. You may have indicated to me your discontent. Rather, though, you went behind my back and discovered someone else would listen. Her arms still crossed, she got to her feet. Ryan, I had no intention of this happening. It exactly did. To be honest, I'm not sure whether I want to mend this anymore. Those words felt to the heart like a blade. What then are you here for? You returned for what? She hesitated, then spoke in a way that caused my blood to freeze, since I wasn't quite ready to go. First, I wanted to see whether we could work things out by chatting to you. But now I looked at her, confused, heartbroken, and angry, all mixed together. Get out, I said through harsh teeth. Ryan, kindly no. You made your decision, Sophia. Now I am making mine. Sort your belongings and head off. I am unable of doing this anymore. I briefly considered her maybe arguing, but she did not. She nodded instead, turned, and strolled up the stairs to pack. I leaned back on the couch numb while I listened to drawers opening and closing. Ideas of what she had done, who this man was, and how long this had been going on flew through my head. One thing was very evident, though. This was not over. Her next action would bring this treachery to a degree I never could have fathomed. Sophia packed not too long ago. She arrived down the stairs with a single bag, her face unreadable. She seemed to want to say anything for a time, but I was not in the mood for more lies or excuses. To where are you going? Trying to keep my voice calm, I asked. Why I even cared eluded me. Perhaps it was the 10-year married couple's residual sense of obligation. She avoided eye contact and answered sharply to a friend. He is it? I questioned directly. She stopped, her hold on the luggage handle getting tighter. That stop gave me all I needed to know. You know what? I waved a lazy hand and said, Don't answer that. Just walk on. She left me alone in the house that felt suddenly too large, too empty without further word. Sitting there for what seemed like hours, I kept staring at the location where she had stood, mentally reliving every last few-month event. Late evenings, unplanned business trips, frequent apologies. All of it now made logical. But my phone buzzed just as I felt the worst was passing. The text came from an unidentified number. Ryan, you did the proper thing. She is not worthwhile. Thought you ought to be aware of her activities. Go through your mails. My pulse thumping, I fixed my eyes on the note. This was someone else. And how did they come to know what was happening? My curiosity won out over me. I signed onto my email from my laptop. Indeed, an email with the subject line, "The truth about Sophia," was waiting for me. I hesitated, my finger circling the mouse. Was that truly something I wanted to know? Of course I did. Clicking on the email, I saw something that made my blood stop cold. Pictures of Sophia with the man from the cafe abound, numbering several dozen. They were not merely drinking coffee, walking hand in hand, laughing, kissing. They were in a motel. The photo timestamps ran back months. Then there was the video, a poor, shaky, low-quality tape showing them in a hotel room. Laughing, Sophia's voice was clear as she replied, "Ryan will never find out. He is overly trustworthy." I closed the laptop hard, my heartbroken and angry chest squeezing. This went beyond an emotional romance. She had lied to my face, deceived me, and today someone else was rubbing it in. The worst thing about it is, though I would find out, I had no idea who wrote the email. And when I did, I would learn exactly how far this betrayal extended. That evening, I slept little at all. My head whirled with queries for which I had no responses. The email had been sent by whom? Why had they shipped it? And how much of Sophia's betrayal they knew? My tiredness had changed by dawn into will. I chose to answer the unidentified number that had texted me. My message was direct and brief. "You are a. Why are you doing this?" One got a response not long after. Just a few minutes later, my phone hummed. "A buddy. Let's just say Sophia is better known to me than you would believe. She isn't who you think she is. If you wish the whole narrative, meet me at the park close by at 2 p.m. I'll be sporting a black hoodie." I considered whether or not I should go after reading the message. This felt like something from a horrible movie, but simultaneously curiosity bit me. If Sophia's betrayal had additional layers, I had to know. I was seated in my car, close to the park entrance, by 1:45 p.m. My palms were slick and my heart was pounding. What then was I doing? Approaching a stranger claiming to know my wife's secrets? Though it sounded absurd, I couldn't get rid of the impression that this someone held the answers I needed. I spotted someone in a black hoodie strolling toward a bench under a big oak tree exactly at 2 p.m. I inhaled deeply, then got out of the car and went toward them. Looking up as I came, the man I now noticed most likely fell in his mid-30s. The cowl covered half of his face, but I could see enough to know he was not familiar. "You're Ryan," he murmured, his voice calm and low. "Indeed, you are." Still folding my arms, I asked. He added, pointing for me to seat, "Call me Dan." Though I hesitated, I finally sat down, keeping some distance between us. "From what you know of Sophia," I inquired. He burst out in a sour laugh. "I had worked with her once. We were close for a little. Let's say, though, I discovered the true nature of her from experience somewhat late." "That is meant to imply what?" Dan drew out his phone and handed it to me. "Look within you." On the screen were a sequence of texts between Sophia and someone saved as Nathan. Explicit messages with specifics about their discussions and strategies to keep Ryan in the dark abound. According to Dan, she has been seeing Nathan almost a year. He is also married, by the way. I learned when I happened to see Nathan and her at an office celebration. She told me to mind my own business. She didn't even give a damn whether I saw them. Staring at the messages, I felt sick. "Why are you bringing this forward? Why now?" "I have been where you are." Thus his voice softened. "I understand how one feels like a fool. Before she pulls you down anymore, I reasoned you deserved to know the truth." I wasn't sure what to say. Though another side of me wanted to yell, part of me wanted to thank him. This was humiliation, planned and carried out just under my nose, not simply betrayal. Dan said as I returned his phone, "She's not stopping, Ryan. People like Sophia, they are not changeable." That was the hard way I learnt. Though I felt something else, an indisputable need to take control, I left the park feeling more damaged than ever. Though Sophia was soon to discover how mistaken she was, she thought she could play me for a fool. From the park, driving home, I could hardly keep my hands steady on the wheel. Dan's comments kept coming back to me. She is not going to stop. That idea irritated me, but it also set off something I hadn't felt in days. Clarity. Sophia had lied, cheated, and denigrated me. After swimming in shock and heartbreak for 24 hours, I now had to concentrate. I meant to stop her from getting away with this. I grabbed my laptop right away upon getting home and began searching. After Dan shared Nathan's name, I soon came onto him on social media. From the appearance of his family pictures, Nathan was everything I wasn't. Polished, charming, and utterly fake. In the suburbs, he owned a large house, 2 children, and a wife. My wrath boiled at the idea of him sitting at my table snatching my wife while acting out the ideal family man. I kept copies of his posts, his work profile, and everything else I could come upon. Though I still had no idea exactly, I wanted to be ready. Sophia and Nathan considered themselves as untouchable. I was going to disprove them. My phone buzzed as I fixed my eye on the screen. Sophia sent this as a note. Tomorrow I have to pick up the remaining stuff. You are going to be home? Her boldness was unearthable. She had hardly left, and now she wanted to waltz back in like it was no great issue? My fingers floated over the keyboard till at last I said, I'll be here. Attend at 5. I worked for hours getting ready for her visit the following day. I arranged the pictures and texts Dan had shown me carefully on the dining room table. To emphasize it even, I printed screenshots of Nathan's family pictures. Sophia entered exactly at 5 p.m. She was dressed immaculately, as always, and her demeanor combined remorse with irritation. She said sharply, I'm just here to grab my stuff, and pointed toward the steps. Not too quickly, I re-Ryaned as I stood in front of her. We should talk. She started to roll her eyes. Ryan, we have previously traveled this road. No, you listen this time, I snapped, cutting her off. I gestured across to the dining table. Get seated. Her gaze strayed to the table, and I watched her face turn pale upon seeing the stack of papers. She sat slowly, fingers wriggling in her lap. This is what is it? Though I could see she already knew, she inquired. I said, distributing the papers in front of her. This is everything. The writings, the pictures, the hotel trips, Nathan's life, his wife, his children. Though you assumed I was too blind to see it, guess what? I know everything these days, Sophia. She examined the proof, her mouth opening and shutting like a fish struggling for life. Ryan, I am able to clarify, not number. She jumped as I pounded my hand on the table. You have plenty conversation. Now it's my time. I inhaled deeply, working to keep my voice steady. You chewed, lied to me, and lacked even the decency to cover it. You sat there giggling at me, wondering I wouldn't know. Well, let me say something. She did. You will now also be dealing with the results. Her calm broke, and for the first time I could see actual terror in her eyes. What does this imply? Your course of action is what I bent in close, speaking softly but forcefully. Though I'm not going to hurt you, Sophia, I also won't let you depart from this damaged. You have lied to my face, wrecked our marriage, and embarrassed me. I think it was well worth it. She answered no, her gaze flitting between my face and the papers. Sophia had nothing to say for once as she packed her belongings and headed out the last time from the house. Feeling a weird mix of sadness, guilt, and relief, I watched her go. I knew, though, this was not the end. Nathan and Sophia had developed their falsehoods on my back. It was now my duty to carefully destroy them piece by piece. It was deafening to hush the house after Sophia left. I was really alone, first in years, but I concentrated on what lay ahead instead of moping in the void. Sophia and Nathan felt they could go on free from repercussions. That never was going to happen. Not after what they had done. I cannot let them off with this. Simple was the first step. I wrote Nathan's wife Michelle an email. Though quick, it was quite obvious. I included a note together with screenshots of the texts and images. I felt you should know the truth about your husband. Tell me whether you would want to discuss. Before sending, I paused to consider whether I was stretching a limit. Then I thought about Sophia laughing in that cafe, discounting me as nothing. I hit submit and had an unusual delight. I received a reply early morning. Michelle wants to get together. I agreed when she proposed a little coffee business outside her neighborhood. She was already there, slumped in the corner when I got there. Michelle was sophisticated, the kind of woman who presented herself with dignity even during tragedy. Ryan, she inquired as I walked up. I nodded and settled across from her. Michelle, I appreciate you meeting with me. She wasted no time. Is that right? All of this. Indeed, I answered, gliding the books and pictures over the table. Though Nathan and my wife Sophia have been having an affair for about a year, I am the one here to tell you. Her hands quivering slightly, she examined the proof. She acknowledged that I suspected something. Her voice hardly raised beyond a whisper, but I never considered it this severe or believed it was this horrible. We assembled timelines and filled in gaps over almost an hour. Michelle was resolved to face Nathan by the end of it, and I couldn't fault her. She turned to me as we were separating and said, "Ryan, they have undervalued us. Let's demonstrate to them their mistakes." I stayed with her words. I felt not alone for the first time since this dream started. I knew it wouldn't be as peaceful as this conference, albeit the actual encounter still lay ahead. I would never forget the day Michelle confronted Nathan. She emailed me earlier that morning. "Today I'm doing this. Prepare for whatever is to come." Though I had no idea what that meant, I had not to wait long to learn. By lunch, messages were flashing on my phone. Sophia 1, 2 from an unidentified number. Sophia delivered a brief, harsh message. "Ryan, what the devil did you do?" Nathan proved to be the unidentified number. His texts were hardly logical and full of wrath. "Ryan, you are a cowardly man." "Michelle could help? What goes wrong with you? Keep out of my life, you'll regret it." The irony of his warnings made me nearly laugh. "Out of your life? Stay away for a year, you have been in my." Michelle had obviously followed no rules. She called me later that evening to relate everything. When she presented Nathan with the data, he had first naturally denied it. But his defenses collapsed when she showed him the pictures and books. "He tried to blame me," Michelle exclaimed over the phone, her voice trembling with a mix of wrath and satisfaction. "He stated it was my responsibility since I missed him. That is unbelievable." "I can," I said with a sour note. Sophia relied on the same justification. "Right now, what are your plans?" Michelle begged. I admitted, not sure yet, but I'm not letting this slide pass. Sophia came unannounced at my house that evening. She seemed messy, far from her usually immaculate self. She exclaimed as she entered, "You've wrecked everything." "Destroyed what, Sophia?" I crossed my arms and asked, "Your ideal little rendezvous? Your opportunity to continue living two lives while I stayed in the dark?" Her eyes flashed with resentment. "You had no right to involve Nathan's family into this. This went between us." "From here," I reacted back. "The moment you started prowling about with him, everyone's business became your own. Sophia, do not stand here as the victim." She opened her mouth to answer, but struggled to come up with the words. She looked disappointed for once. "Sophia, what are you hoping for?" At last I asked, my voice softer but no less strong. Her voice broke, and I'm not sure what she said. "I simply never imagined it would come to this." I shook my head, a sense of sympathy passing by quickly pushed aside. "Regrets cannot be undone too late. You took a decision. You now must live with the results." She looked at me for a long time, then turned and left without saying anything else. Though I was mistaken, I believed that would be the end of it. Only just beginning was the fallout. The days following Sophia's arrival were not at all tranquil. Messages from family members, friends, even some of Sophia's colleagues who had somehow sensed the circumstances continued to vibrate on my phone. News arrived quickly, and soon people began to lean one way or another. Of course, Sophia portrayed the victim. I had overreacted, she told everyone who would listen, that I was cruel and trying to ruin her life. Nathan, on the other hand, turned quiet. Although I didn't care enough to find out, I assumed Michelle had him surrounded at home. I hadn't expected, though, how profoundly this would affect my life. Friends I considered as mine started asking questions of me. Why had I pulled Nathan's family into it and exposed Sophia so widely? I found it hard to believe. Claire, one of our friends, called one evening. "Ryan, I simply lately learned about everything. You're good. I slowed down. Claire and Sophia had been friends for years, and although I wasn't sure I could trust her, I resolved to be honest. To be honest, not true, Claire. I'm not good. Sophia lied to, cheated on, and denigrated me. And now, for revealing it, I am the bad guy? Claire mumbled. Look, I'm not suggesting what she did was right. Perhaps you might have handled it differently. Ryan, people are chatting. You have created messiness here. Her comments stung, but I managed to keep cool. Chaotic? Claire, she turned against me. From what standpoint did you expect me to act? Just watch silently as she walks all over me. Claire said, after a quiet moment. Uncertainty is great, complicated is it? I said, my voice icy, not difficult. She decided which to do. She now lives with the fallout. The call stopped soon after, which infuriated me more than ever. Everyone seemed to want to ignore the terrible truth, that Sophia and Nathan, not me, were the story's villains. Still, there was one flash of clarity among the tumult. Michelle phoned me once more, her voice more resolutely than before. Ryan, she continued, I believe it's time we proceed farther. What do you imply? Uncertain about her direction, I queried. After speaking with a lawyer, she advised me that, should you be willing, we should both formally complain about them. Nathan's employment has a clear policy on personal behavior at the workplace. Should we proceed, Sophia would suffer consequences as well, and he might lose his job. I stopped so her words would sink in. Though at the same time they had crossed every limit possible, it seemed extreme. I said at last, let's do it. It's time they answered for the whole weight of their actions. I knew as I hung up the phone that the path ahead wouldn't be simple, but for the first time in weeks I felt as though I was at last regulating my life once more. Not yet was the fallout finished. If anything, it was simply getting started. The wheels were in motion 1 week following Michelle's suggestion. Each of us formally complained about Nathan and Sophia. While I supplied more material, Michelle had gathered sufficient proof from Nathan's phone and business emails to support our assertions. Now it was about responsibility rather than about getting retribution. The results were instantaneous. Nathan's firm started an internal probe, and he was off within a few days. Sophia was also questioned. Her work sometimes overlapped Nathan's. Their so-called covert romance had been anything else. Words passed fast among their co-workers, and their reputations started to fall apart. Sophia phoned me multiple times during the inquiry, but I missed each call. She left voicemails full of desperate appeals mixed with sorrow and wrath. Ryan, you have made your argument. Cut this right now, so kindly. We have this under control. There was nothing left to mend, though. I stayed in touch with Michelle all through the process. She was a strong ally who truly deserved this. I felt as like I was not battling this alone for the first time in weeks. By the end of the month, the outcomes were unambiguous. Nathan lost his job for breaking business rules, while Sophia's contract with her employer wasn't extended. They had both destroyed bridges they could not reconstruct. With the dust at last settling, I turned my attention to reconstructing my life. Once loaded with terrible memories, the house started to seem like mine once more. I cleaned, eliminating any hint of Sophia. Like losing old skin, it felt cathartic. I came upon one from our wedding day one evening as I was sorting through an old photo box. Sophia shone, and I thought of how delighted I had been at that same time. It served as a conflicting reminder of what I believed we have. Not really. I stopped despising her. The wrath had subsided to a peaceful acceptance. I made mine. She made hers. Regarding Michelle, she turned out to be an unexpected friend. We got together for coffee sometimes to exchange updates and consider all that had happened. She was headed forward, too, emphasizing her children and her own feeling of closure. She mentioned something once that really stayed with me. Ryan, you cannot let this define who you. Though it's not the full book, it is a component of your story. She knew exactly what I needed. Though not perfect, it was my life once more. I also felt free, for the first time in a long time.